First thing I want to do is talk about stance width. In the game of football, you need those feet up and under you, right? For balance, mobility, leverage, power, all those things that count. In snapping, of course, we've talked about the fact, a normal stance is a little wider than the shoulders. In snapping, we probably need 4 to 6. To a tall guy like you, maybe 8 to 10 inches wider than your regular snap, just because we need extra space between the knees to make a quick, powerful, uninhibited throw through the leg. All right? First thing we did is you were pretty darn wide yesterday. Being that wide leads to some issues. Number one, it's hard to sit down in the stance without getting a lot of pressure in the hip flexors. So you end up with a high center of gravity. Okay. Number two, if you do sit down, you get a lot of pressure in the hip flexors. That tenses you up, tightens you up, slows down the whole motion, saps your power. Number three, the higher your center of gravity, the harder it is actually to distribute weight around that center of gravity and stay balanced throughout the snap. The fourth thing is, the wider you get, the less you can actually channel that leg drive into the hips and back towards the target, so you can capture that motion energy and generate power from the lower body. Okay. And the last thing is the thing I worry about most. The wider you get, the more likely you are to finish the snap with locked out knees. Very quick path to a short career in football. I don't want to see you get hurt. So what we basically did is we brought those feet in under you, got you to a stance width that was comfortable, no tension in the hip flexors. If you ever feel like it's too narrow and not comfortable, but you don't want to move your feet out, try doing this. Try pointing the toes outward, because what that'll do is get the knees out of the way. It'll also help you as you sit into the stance to really have the load bearing or the weight bearing positioned solidly on the quadriceps, which is where we want it. Okay? Go ahead and set up over the ball. Let's just see what your stance width looks like right now. Facing the camera, I'm sorry. Does that feel comfortable?
Yep.
Now we do know you're a tall guy. You like a slightly wider stance than the average bear, and that's fine as long as there's no tension, as long as we're able to generate leg drive and channel it back in the hips towards your target, okay? Go ahead and step up and stand back over here for me. The other things that we had going on, number one, I think you were slightly tall in the saddle, meaning that for a guy who blind snaps like you, shoulders to hips, we want to be fairly horizontal to the ground, all right? So that all that energy can just travel straight back towards your target. Slightly tall there, a little bit underextended on the front end. What we figured out is you were a little low on the front end, a little tall on the back end, okay? So what we needed to do essentially was to sit a little deeper in the stance, bend the knees a little more, and take the head and shoulders, raise it a little higher off the ground. That moves you further from the ball and improves arm extension, okay? The last thing that we saw is that you're a little bit flat-footed, okay? When you're flat-footed, you're not going to win a lot of battles in the game of football, no matter what the position is. And the second thing is, basically from that position, about the only way you can explode with the legs is straight up. That's not conducive to capturing the lower body motion energy and channeling it into the snap. We need that angle to be back into the hips a little bit, so that the lower body drive can meet up with the upper body drive and converge in an arrow point that's directed straight back at our target. Does that make sense? Okay, so we essentially needed to shift your weight a little bit so we got the knees positioned optimally just about right over the toes. All right? The last thing that we had is your left hand, your guide hand, your secondary throwing hand. A little bit passive. You didn't really have a grip on it. You just kind of had it sitting on the ball where you couldn't even hold it. My suggestion is to strengthen that grip. And what I mean by that is spread the fingers a little bit and get positive fingertip pressure so that you could actually hold and control the ball with that hand as well. That'll enable you to accelerate the ball with both halves of your body. Two hands, you're going to have more power and more control. Okay? Go ahead and set up. The first thing we're going to do is three-step you to get you in an optimal stance. And then we'll show you how we get you there on our own. You ready? First thing I do is I pull you forward, get your knee bend to 90 or less, straightens the back, fully extends the arms. Then I raise you up, maximizing operating room under the torso. Last thing I do is I shove you back into the hips towards your target, not down to the ground, but back in the hips towards the target so the heels touch the ground, knees are over the toes, and you're comfortable. Does that feel good? Okay. Now, we raised your front end a little, sat the back end a little, flattened you out a touch, and then if we needed to, we could shift the ball slightly forward. Just make sure that there's no weight shift involved. Okay. We want you solid and balanced, neutral on your feet. Give it a throw. How's that feel? Good. Okay. Perfect setup will almost always lead to a perfect snap. Okay? Let's do that one more time without the three-step. We'll just show you the adjustments we made. Okay? So we raised the front end a little higher, sat the back end a little deeper, and then shifted weight to get the knees right over the toes for a balls of the feet, balanced neutral setup. Make sure you use that left hand as well. How's that feel? Got any questions? Nope. Looking good. Let's go ahead.